Welcome to Hot Springs Village Inside Out, a weekly podcast where Hot Springs Village, Arkansas is the star. Join me, Randy Cantrell, and my co-host Dennis Simpson as we discuss the history, facts, people, places, events, lots more surrounding Hot Springs Village, Arkansas. Visit the website at hotspringsvillageinsideout.com. For the audio listening audience, you are going to want to watch the video because this is another screen share.
We try to minimize those, but this couldn't really be described very well. It could, but not very well without a couple of screenshots here. If you're looking at the video right now, and I'll come back to the 5 mile view here, we're looking at 26,000 acres of Hot Springs Village, Arkansas that runs roughly 18.3 miles from one end to the other. It's about 41 square miles. It's 284 subdivisions. And I hate to just get stuck in all the quotes and such, but this is going to be a pertinent issue here in a minute. When Mr. Cooper started building this, it was contemporaneous with Bella Vista. And a lot of people will ask a lot of questions. You know, Randy, we've been talking about the future funding task force and the rate increase and all these things. And a lot of the reports that we see coming up, they compare us to Bella Vista because we're built around the same time. Our infrastructure is around the same age old. Our roads are the same age. Our water's the same age. Our sewer. I mean, there's a lot of similarities, right?
Bella Vista, also a Cooper development?
Bella Vista is also a Cooper development. It's in extreme northwest Arkansas, and I mean extreme northwest Arkansas, as you'll see in just a moment. It's 34,000 acres. And I'm spend a little time, just a few seconds, explaining that how Hot Springs Village is the world's largest gated community, not just the largest in the United States that we've heard for 50 years, but there's a place called Xinjiang, China, that has a lot of cells of gated communities, but they're not contiguous. There's not one place where you drive in and you drive 18 miles later on the other end. That's not how it is. There's lots of cells of places that are called Xinjiang. Okay. Mexico City has exactly the same thing. Mexico City has dozens of little bitty gated communities, but they all call themselves together, and there's a name of the entity. But it's not a singularly gated community. It's not when you and I think of you drive in one gate, you drive out the other. Right. It's the village. This is the place.
And Bella Vista operates in that regard how?
Not at all. Bella Vista decided that
no gates at all.
No gates at all. And there was a discussion if they would be gated, if they would be private. And when Mr. Cooper started building them in the early 70s, about the same time he was building here, there was a discussion because, and I nearly have to go into just a little more history real quick. At the time, the dynamic powers, the dynamic economic powers of Arkansas, be that as they may, were from Little Rock to Pine Bluff down toward Helena, which was huge delta country and tons of agricultural. And at that time, 50 years ago, people looked back and said, man, if we could lose those hillbillies up in the Northwest, up by the Ozarks, that'd be okay. Well, who knew they were going to have the largest corporation in the world, the largest meat manufacturer in the world, one of the largest transportation manufacturers in the world, providers in the world to provide chicken and
speaking of goods. Walmart, by the way.
Mm-hmm, exactly. So in the last 50 years, there has been a tremendous, just exponential change between the flavors and the privilege, I guess you would say, of Pine Bluff, which is now known as poor report, I would say. It's a failing community or getting smaller all the time. And Helena was which is right on the state line. Helena was in the Wall Street Journal about 8 years ago as one of the few places in America that has lost 1,000 people a year for the last 51 years in a row. Yeah.
It's not a record you want to have.
Not the record you want to have. And Pine Bluff is somewhat associated with that because it used to be, Randy, when you and I were kids growing up, there was a guy on a farmer and he had a little Ford tractor and it was 12 foot wide, maybe 15 foot wide, and he would go plow a few acres a day. You've seen these tractors nowadays. They're 8-wheel behemoths with 220-foot spread. You don't need as many people.
Yep.
So
welcome to corporate farming.
Exactly. So much of that that has died in the southeast of Arkansas, and there's still a lot of farming, but it's very highly mechanized. But so many people have moved to support the Northwest economy, which is Bella Vista and those areas. So let's go back to our topic here real quick. Bella Vista is 34,000 acres without any gates, and they are a city municipality. Their POA voted some 20-something years ago to decide to be a regular city.
Yep.
So I'm going to zoom out now here just a little. And on the right-hand side, on the east-hand side here, you see Little Rock as a major city.
Mm-hmm.
And then we see the Ouachita National Forest, which is 1.7 million acres of awesome. I'm going to scoot up here just a little. On the upper left-hand side, we're going to go up to Fort Smith, which is right here on Interstate 40. Okay. We're going to go up a little bit further. Now we're in the the Ozark National Forest. Beautiful area. Nothing wrong with it at all. Just absolutely pristinely beautiful area. And as we go on up, we're going to come into Fayetteville, which is right here along the state line. And Siloam Springs is the state line. And we're going to scoot up a little bit further. And we are right now, let me get there. There we go. Here's Bentonville, which is the hub of Walmart and the Jones Trucking and Tyson Foods. And I mean,
all of those associated businesses.
Exactly.
Walmart.
And there was not too long ago, there was a decree from Walmart that if you wanted to deal with Walmart, that you would have a facility or a home, your vendor would be
an office there
and have an office there. So
now back up and help our audience understand. For those people listening that may not understand, give us the brief overview. POA versus a municipality.
Great question, Randy. The POA is a property owners association. Now, most times you're familiar with a homeowners association because those are typically 200 to 300 homes or less. In Hot Springs Village, the property owners association includes people who own raw land, undeveloped land, unbuilt land, and people that have homes with, land with houses on them. That comes to right at 26,284 lots in Hot Springs Village. About a third of those are built out. In Bella Vista, if I'm not mistaken, I'm thinking they've got a number around 38 to 40,000 properties. And as you can see the lakes right here, let me zoom in just a touch.
But about 10,000 acres more, or 8 to 10,000 acres more.
Exactly. And the real difference that I'm getting to here is that these people get their ambulance service, their fire service, their police service, their roads paved, their trash picked up, fill in the blank.
Well, you are a taxing municipality where Hot Springs Village is not.
Exactly. And that's when we see these task force comparisons. This is what it cost in Bella Vista, which is a contemporaneous facility. There's not a question. Yes, they have the same roads that are about the same age and the water sewers. And yes, we're alike in many ways, except that our POA dues have to pay for our fire, water, sewer, golf courses, everything.
They've got access to funding that Hot Springs Village does not have because of taxes.
Absolutely, positively. And once again, I'm not bashing the comparison either way.
No, it's just a difference.
It's just a big difference. It's a huge difference. So when you say, well, their POA dues are this, I'm like, yeah, but their county taxes come back into the village and into their facility. Our county taxes do not come back except for one exception, and that is to educate our roughly 900 kids a year. So we have two of the best funded school districts in all of Arkansas. We've literally been sued 3 times in the last 40 years because of our funding. We're funded great because there's not that many people here. All the lots have been purchased. Everybody's paying POA dues on them, or everybody's paying taxes on them.
Right.
And so those funds go to the schools. We just don't have that many kids. Does that make some sense?
Yes.
So my objective
is there, and not to sidetrack you, and we are hearing what's the dog's name?
Scraps is making his contribution. Scraps.
Okay, you're going to have to tell the audience why the name.
I'll tell Scraps the name. Scraps lived for 3.5 years at the Home Plate Cafe just outside Highway 7, and he was too wild to touch. We didn't know that. I sat down with my lovely wife. He jumped in her lap like he had known her his whole life, and people said, "Is that your dog?" And I said, "I've never seen that dog before in my life." And long story short, about 6 months later, we were able to get him, and they called him Barney. Barney? A dog? Barney? And I was like, Diane said, what would we call him? I had a dog named Barney. Well, that's not a bad idea.
Barney Fife was his registered name. Yeah. Bernard P. Fife was actually his registered name.
And his one good bullet. One good bullet.
Yeah.
Anyway, the reason
So
I bring
scraps
that
because he came from a restaurant, I assume.
and he lived on
Scraps.
scraps, of course. Yeah. Anyway,
Well, what I was going to ask you, getting back to, not to sidetrack you from Bella Vista, but is there I know there's not a comparable as far as size, but nationally, are there any comps? Because no. I've seen enough in social media and whatnot, and people arguing about, well, it's not comparative, but if you were, and the task force, listen, I salute the work because it's arduous, difficult, detail-oriented work. But are there comps in America?
I appreciate the fact that every time we have new officers sworn in to the board, we have new board members sworn in. There's a lady, and I like her. I don't know her personally, but she's from the Rose Law Firm, one of the most respected law firms in the state of Arkansas. And she will look these people down and stare them in the eye and say, "You are without peer. There is no one in the United States or in the world that has more members of a property owners association. None. Ever, anywhere."
So you are in uncharted water.
Exactly. And it takes a few minutes for that to kind of ring in. And I wanted to bring up one other thing too. By the way, this is an absolutely beautiful area. I love the spot. Bella Vista is a pretty area. It's a different kind of pretty, but there's one caveat that a lot of people didn't notice. And Randy, I'm going to take you on a little tour here real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
Notice how it's very hilly and notice all the mountains, all the pretty lakes, see the spines. There's a thing called Highway 71.
Yes.
And Highway 71 runs right smack dab through the middle of both of the golf courses. Now, I think they built a third one, if I'm not mistaken. But as you drive along the highway, you're like, wow, that's a beautiful golf course. As you're playing the golf course, you're like, wow, that's a highway. It's a highway. Okay, so what's the big deal? There's a highway there. So it's a unique place. It's truly great benefit. There's no question. It is a beautiful location, but the comps end at some point, if you get my point, because we simply don't have, and I'll say both sides of the highway are Bella Vista, but it is a municipality. They have public streets. They have public ambulances. They have public police. And we have to privately fund each one of those.
And that may have been, well, they voted for it, so it was clearly their choice, and may have been an ideal choice given that they are in an area that is so economically driven by Walmart, and Hot Springs Village doesn't have Walmart.
Sure. And to be frank about it, I mean, let's be fair. If there was a major interstate running through the middle of Hot Springs Village, that would change the complexion of everything, Randy. I mean, sure. How do you monitor those gates? How do you?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so
some practical realities to the whole situation.
Yeah, there really is. So I'm not critical in any way. I just wanted to be. Yeah, it's just very explanatory that, as I say, without peer, exceptionally without peer.
Well, but Cooper Development began both communities at about the same time, so you can understand why historically people would want to compare, even though it is apples to oranges.
Yeah, well, and for example, one of my other favorites is over in Tellico Village. Tellico Village is it's associated with the TVA, the Tennessee Valley Authority land area. It's absolutely beautiful. It's knockout gorgeous. And they've got public roads, and they've got public ambulance and public fire. And, they have a line at which, okay, well, inside the community, we'll pave these roads, but you pave the rest of those. But if I'm not mistaken, I think their POA dues are $130, $140 a month. It's reasonable. Frankly, and nobody's asked me, but I'll throw it out. I think probably the homeowner fees in the village are probably a little low, but there's 26,284 of us too. So it's a bigger number to divide the principal by.
What's the history been as far as the push? Well, that's a bad word.
That's okay.
Because it's not necessarily a push, but the discussion to convert the village into a municipality, to incorporate, is sometimes called it.
Yeah, that's one of the best questions. And I've Frank Lemming, he doesn't mind me using his name. He was the former publisher of the paper, a very smart guy, used to send out newsletters all the time about everything, the numbers of rounds of golf and the rain and the whatever. Very smart guy. And he had talked about taking down the gates and that we would get those funds to come back in. We would get different traffic. We would get whatever. And he's right. Except he kind of left out the part, and I reinstate for our guests that are listening and hopefully watching, On this side, back behind me in Saline County, we have 86% of the national crime rate outside the village. On this side of the village, outside the village in Garland County, we have 88% of the national crime rate. Where I'm sitting right now, we have 13.2% of the national crime rate. The crime rate is 87% lower in where I'm sitting right now. That's 4 standard deviations, Randy. If you know anything about math, that's through the roof, off the charts, low crime. And I can't say that we wouldn't be giving up some part of that if we took down the gates and let people into, frankly, a very, very rural area right up against national forest. There's
has there been any widespread movement that gained any kind of traction to change it?
There's been a discussion, but right when it comes up to security, the discussion stops.
Yeah.
And I can't say that I blame them. I mean, once again, I'm trying to be objective here.
I'm speaking as a guy who's hoping to one day make an investment and have a place there, and sure. It would dramatically change. It would change the dynamic for me.
Well, of course,
because I feel fairly certain at this stage of my life, I've got enough life experience to know that would change the complexity of the whole place. It would the complexion of the whole place. It would change the vibe, the feel. It would change everything.
Well, you and I have many times talked about Jim Rohn and other motivational speakers, and Jim Rohn has a great quote that is extremely simple, but incredibly poignant. And he said, we had some brilliant people that set up laws, and they set up constitutions, and they set up states, and they set up districts, and they made prisons.
Yeah.
Because there were going to be bad people.
That's right.
And I'm not saying we need to build a moat and it has to all stay out there. I'm just saying, if you were someone coming in, Randy, wouldn't you look at the environment and then go, man, it used to have this and now it doesn't have that. Maybe that's not where I want to invest.
Well, and as a person who spends a considerable amount of time and money through short-term rental inside the village, and because it's just my wife and I, we are always staying in a guest suite that is in someone's residence.
Sure.
You have some properties that are whole houses for people that are bringing, 4, 6, 8, however many people. I don't do that. So as a result, and the only reason that that's important to the story is because I meet the host. I meet these hosts who live in these houses, and the people, most assuredly, it would change. It would change if it were not a gated community.
Yeah, very much so.
So there's that.
Yeah. And like I say, the only thing I wanted to do was just bring up the difference. When we see these studies and these comparisons, I just simply wanted to say, it's apples to hamburgers. It's not the same. It's just not the same. That said, are they both contemporaneous? Were they both born about the same time? Do we both have the same age issues? Absolutely. It's not the same.
The practical reality, it's like any enterprise. The bills have got to be paid, and the appetite has got to meet the budget.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not easy, but it is sometimes rather simple as far as the numbers, right? I mean, we've got to be able, you just can't go around with champagne taste and have a beer income. It doesn't work. And it won't work in the village. As somebody who's looking at it from afar, and I realize people, they may want more, and we want more, and we want to pay less and we want to get more. Well, I do too, but that's just it's not practical. We had John Paul on, the interim GM, and I was real appreciative of his sentiment. We came here for what we came here for. We now need to sustain it. We need to keep it. We need to keep it up. And I applaud the efforts of anybody in the village to try to do that. Here.
Wow. And I agree wholeheartedly. Well,
thanks for listening to another episode of Hot Springs Village Inside Out, a podcast where Hot Springs Village, Arkansas is the star. Please subscribe to the podcast. You can do that by visiting our website, hsvinsideout.com, and tell a friend.